Hey guys, welcome back to the BuzWeaver channel. And in our top stories today from the New York Times, in archive today, of course, because it's behind a paywall, Democrats throw money at a problem, countering GOP clout online. At private gatherings, strategists and donors are swapping ideas to help the party capture the digital mojo that helped President Trump win. Yes, there's a big price tag, but here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. We know here on the BuzWeaver channel that Democrats have a huge problem when it comes to learning from their mistakes. And one of those mistakes was, of course, suggesting in the last 8 years that men were toxic and a threat to women. And now suddenly they want to understand why they're having a problem with men. And of course, even to this day, they are still focused on DEI, diversity and inclusion, intersectionality and identitarianism and pronouns. And they just don't get it yet. They're going to these big parties and these events, and they're getting strategists, and they're getting donors, and they're getting all these people to try to figure out something that's very simple. And that is basically that they don't learn from their mistakes, and they think it's got to be something other than their own mistake making, right? So from the New York Post, Dem donors lived it up at swanky hotels trying to figure out why it's losing the working class. This is embarrassing. And it's extraordinary to think that they just, I mean, all they would have to do is spend, a few minutes talking to any conservative or anyone on the right, but they don't want to do that because then that would prove that they were wrong. Top Democratic operatives and donors have been hobnobbing in luxury hotels while trying to figure out why the party is shedding men and the working class, moves that have liberals slammed as out of touch. Okay, they have there. It kind of threw me off. In one instance, liberals' super PAC Future Forward hosted a gathering in the Ritz-Carlton Resort in wealthy Half Moon Bay, California, to apprise donors of what went wrong in 2024. Well, it's not difficult to figure out. Prominent figures such as Gavin Newsom and Governor Beshear were reported to be in attendance, and in some of the elite gatherers featured appetizers like short rib tostones, mini lobster rolls, and beef tenderloins. Okay, yeah, sure, they spent it up. And then among the strategies discussion was a $20 million effort, codenamed Sam, speaking with American men, a strategic plan, which is working towards stemming Democrats' hemorrhaging of young men. Well, the problem was, of course, as we said here, they were attacking men. Men were toxic. Remember, they were absolutely, unfavorable to the Democrats. And here's from Devory Darkins, who I saw him talking about this yesterday, and I just thought it was absolutely fascinating that the Democrats, clearly to us, fail miserably, and they just don't understand men, which is why they're having to do this research. All they have to do is just talk to people or listen to people who aren't in their club, and they would understand.
Yeah, that very idea of going to YouTube, that's where people are getting their information. That was new. Democrats saw that same data and ignored it. You also saw the now famous proposal that the Trump team did with going on Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, not traditional Republicans, but they went in there because they saw that audience they had tremendous opportunity with. But the difference is, to your point, a syntax study isn't going to do it. Authenticity is. And that's what's missing from the Democrat Party today. Doing a TikTok dance or inserting some four-letter words into your tweets, not going to get you there if people aren't buying your message and buying your messengers.
And I agree. And it is about not buying it, because we saw how the strategy, or part of it at least, towards Donald Trump was to engage in lawfare against Donald Trump, right? To smear him, to drag him through the courts, to convince everyone that he was a one-dimensional villain, right? Well, they tried that strategy along with, of course, their regular DEI stuff. But, of course, the thing is that Americans could see through the nonsense. They could see that the Democrats were trying to sell them something that no one wanted to buy. There was no genuineness to them. So not only are they not learning from their mistakes, they don't realize that they come across as disingenuous. There isn't anything substantive to what they're saying. It's not sincere at all. And they just think that they can do these things, these strategies and these plans and these metrics and these sorts of things, and not realize the human condition, not understand the human human condition. But I think it's important that we also see what CNN had to say, because you can see the difference in language between the New York Times, kind of, making it fluffy that, they were gathered together doing these things. And then, of course, the New York Post basically said, they're out there spending all this big money out there with donors and they're living it up and having a great time. And then, of course, it's obvious that it's not that difficult to figure out. As you said there, people are coming to YouTube or individuals. I'm a small channel. I'm not anticipating that there's going to be this large, huge, gigantic audience of Democrats or others that are going to come here to try to figure out, what is it about, how is it that we failed as Democrats? Because they're never going to admit that they failed. They're never going to admit their mistakes. But let's see what they say here on CNN.
So we mentioned new voters, which is also young voters, another way to say that. And now I want to talk about men. And here's something from the New York Times. This is written by our friend of the show, Shane Goldmacher. The prospectus for one new $20 million effort obtained by the Times aims to reverse the erosion of Democratic support among young men, especially online. It is codenamed SAM, short for Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, and promises investments to study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and the virility in these spaces. It recommends buying advertisements in video games, among other things.
That's absurd. They can't even admit that the problem was toxic masculinity. Blaming men of toxic toxic masculinity, right? And that, and they try to stereotype men as gamers and, not wanting to associate with people in particular ways or engage. Excuse me, guys. And it's so extraordinary. Again, they're moving away from everything but what the actual problem is.
So you're the man here. I will not mansplain you. All I will say is, duh.
Yeah, I know. Look, they should have probably recognized this a couple of cycles before when this trend was growing very apparent. This was a huge problem for them in the past election cycle, and they need to figure it out, because right now the Democratic message is really all over the place. What do they exactly stand for as they head into the midterm elections? But right now it's a hope, really, among the Democratic leaders that that voters will recoil what they view as overreach from the Trump administration by the...
Yeah, see, it always comes back to Trump, right? The idea is to get people to sour on Donald Trump. Not that the Democrats have anything tangible and substantive and constructive to add to it, but that they recoil from Donald Trump, that they sour on Trump alone, and then they can just go back to their indoctrination, their ideology, their philosophy, and worldviews, because they don't want to accept the fact that, as they were saying here, even on CNN, that they were stereotyping men and suggesting that they were toxic and a danger to women. And they just don't, they're not even admitting it here on CNN.
They will make the argument that they need to be a check on Trump's power and to use Trump's push to move ahead with this so-called big, beautiful bill, which rail about the tax cuts and that do benefit wealthy taxpayers.
Okay, so he's just going off topic here. He's just trying to change direction here. He's deflecting. And because, as we mentioned here on the BuzWeaver channel, and I'm not suggesting that I have all the answers and know everything, I just know that when you tell men that they're toxic and they're a danger to women, that's a problem. When you stereotype them as just playing games and just not, well, whatever they want to define men as. But the problem I had with it was the fact that they, I didn't really have a problem with it because I could understand and see how quickly they were going to lose men in the election. But, of course, their strategy mostly centered around the fact that they wanted everyone to sour on Donald Trump. And, of course, we've talked about that here almost extensively here on the BuzWeaver channel. But, nonetheless, I welcome your thoughts and comments down in the comment section. Isn't it extraordinary that the Democrats have this inability to be intellectually honest enough to realize that maybe it's something they're doing that caused the problem, right? They want to try to get these audiences. They want to try to get influence. They have, as we talked here about here on the BuzWeaver channel, Michelle Obama and influencers out there. They're trying to get people out there in the podcast. They're trying to get people out there in the social media space, as she was saying earlier about on TikTok and these sorts of things. But they're going about it in a very... kind of the way I kind of look at it, the way people give suggestions and recommendations when it comes to building your channel, right? Using metrics and all these sorts of things. You got to have a sense of genuineness. People have to have a sense of sincerity from you as a person to know that what you're saying and what you're trying to suggest is meaningful and substantive. And, again, I don't have all the answers sometimes, but, we can talk about these topics and then I give you my opinion. But nonetheless, guys, I want to thank all of you across New Tech, that's BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey for your guys' continued support, and everyone here on YouTube. I appreciate it. Appearing there on the screen, that'd be the channel icon. You guys can click on that to subscribe, as well as to select notifications. That way you know when there's content here on the channel. And I'll see all you guys in the next video.